Thanks for sticking around, first of all. It's nice to see so many of you here. We won't keep you for too long, I hope. I'm Niklas, and this is Hasse. We're Squeeders, first off, so you have a slight disclaimer. We might be partial. But we're here today to talk about a quite nifty tool we use at our current assignments, which is called Hoverfly, if it wasn't apparent. So basically what this is a service virtualization tool, very enterprisey word, for basically API simulator, mock server. So basically what it does is I have a system that sends data to some other system, familiar. It records data that you send from your system and that's responded from the other system, and it can play it back at a later stage. So it works sort of like a man-in-the-middle machine for HTTP requests, which can be quite nice when you're doing testing or you have some flaky system you're depending on or something like that. So basically what it does is this. I have a system, it does a request. Hoverfly is set as a proxy in between my system and the external system. The request goes out, response comes in, and basically this is all transparent for your system. All it knows is some stupid proxy server, just as I would have in my enterprisey system. It records it and plays it back. Very simple scenario. It just simple downloading to a local database. Nothing fancy. Where it really comes in is this part, where it plays it back to you. So basically, without doing anything more than flipping a switch on the machinery, I'm still doing the same request on my end. The only thing is that the proxy server intercepts it and sends the stored response back. So basically, if I'm running a test in a CI machinery, I have a system that happens to be down somewhere else, or I, for some other reason, like I'm doing performance tests or such, don't want to use the real system, this can be a very nice alternative. So when to use it? Well, component tests, performance tests, and similar are the sort of standard way you'd use this one, and how we're using it mostly as well. It's also quite nice because you can simulate flakiness in a system. I mean, even if you have a very good, stable system on the other side, you can say that, well, what happens if I just sort of probe it, or it would go down, or my AWS container has spun down for some reason, or whatever. Or you start getting even errors or such in the responses. It's something that everyone should test, not always done more than in production, but it's still a very good thing to do. Another thing that can be very nice with having such a recording possibility and intercepting possibility mostly is you can simulate API functionality that's not there yet. So someone on the other side, that other team that has promised to do something for half a year, they've given you the API specs, but nothing's really working, everything's flaky. Well, I'll just write the damn thing myself, and I'll work with it, and then when they finally deliver, everything will well, not work since they changed the spec, but still, it should have worked. So basically what I would do in that case, I can't obviously record the things, but I can write it myself, and we'll see how to do those things later as well. So why would I use this one? I mean, that sounds like the sort of typical scenario for using a mock or a stub or something else. Everything that's been done since like the 70s or earlier, I don't know, Stone Age. Basically, the most important thing here is that this doesn't actually need to change your code at all. You're setting this thing as a proxy. It's external in every sense. You're still sending the HTTP requests. It's still going over the network. It's just that it's something else that happens to be responding, but you don't know that. Basically, it's also ongoing some very, very fast development right now. So, I mean, we've covered almost all of our use cases already with it, but it's still they're pumping out new functionality like there's no tomorrow. which is very, very nice for an open source, or not an open source, sorry, but a project that you happen to be using. So basically, it already covers most of our use cases, and there's some really good performance in it as well. And we'll see some examples of that later as well, if we have the time and if everyone is sort of feeling energetic after these, I don't know, what, 2 hours, 2.5. So that's the why. Some competition that exists in the area that some of you might know of. WireMock is one thing. It's written in Java. It's been around for ages. It has some of the features that's already existed in Hoverfly. It's quite slow. There are things that are not really working out with it, so it's very nice to have some competition in the area. Hoverfly is written in Go and sort of made for performance tests and such. This one is written in Java and was written like, I don't know, 10 years ago it feels like. So quite soggy, not very good for performance tests. Then you have the Spring framework, of course, if you happen to be using that one. You have the very simple name, the mock REST service server. So, and that is basically the similar idea, but in that case, you're using the sort of Spring magic to say that no, you're not really going to use HTTP, are you? You can still do it locally here, and we'll just be friends, right? And also, it doesn't have all the functionality that Hoverfly and an external service would provide for you. So that's also an alternative. But we're not going to keep you for too long with like dreary introductions and such. We like code, and we think you do too as well. So it's time for some curling. My friend Hasse here.
All right. Let's dig into what Hoverfly actually does. All right, I will need to. All right.
We'll have to mirror the display in that case.
All right. Yeah, it's your computer.
Thank you.
All right. Do I need to increase the size? Can everyone see way back?
Increase it a bit.
Is it okay? Ah, no. All right. How about that? All right, good. So, Hoverfly. Yeah. Basically, they have a command line tool, which we love because we like the terminal. And that is essentially, the easiest thing is to just start it up. Oh, it's already started. Let's shut it down so we can see how it looks when it starts up. So now we're going to start it. What we see here is, since I didn't put in any port or anything, we'll just put the default port, which will be proxy port 8500 and admin port 8888. What we will get then is, on the admin port, you can go into here and see a dashboard, if you like that, and actually manage it from the admin port. And you can also, they have a REST interface, which we can talk a bit about later. But the interesting port is the proxy port. So let's check out if we just run something towards time dot. Now what is that? JSON test. And if we go there, what we essentially will get back from that one is the current date and time in some time zone. But if we actually do it, I need to make sure that we are running in. So what I'm doing right now, I'm setting the Hoverfly to go into capture mode. So, and when we now go towards this one with the proxy, we will instead get a new time again. But this time what we have done, which wasn't shown, is that we will have now time is frozen, as we can see. So this time we actually got the recorded response back instead of them going out towards the real one. If we want to check how this actually looks like, we can export it. And then we can check what our response actually looks like. Can you see the back? All right, good. So what we essentially have here is we have a list of pairs, which will be a request-response pair. Then we'll have some global actions where you can put in delays and stuff, and just some metadata that is not really interesting right now. So if we start by looking at the request, here is what it has put in here, that we went to time.jsontest.com, we went to the regular path with a get method and HTTP. This means that whenever something comes in, again with this one, if we're in simulate mode, it will instead send back this response, which is the HTTP status, some body, and a bunch of headers, and then this flag we will look at later. But this is essentially the basics. But we need something better, because we can't just have this every time, because some applications may be doing like auto-generated IDs and stuff like that. Like when you send something, maybe it sends in the body or as a parameter today's date or a transaction ID or something. For example, if we will do something like whoops. Maybe I need to put that there. So let's get back to this, and let's put a transaction ID equals 1 here. And we'll do this through.
And now you'll also see that he's not using the same service anymore.
Oops.
He's using something called HTTP bin, also a quite nice service. Basically what it does is it mirrors what you send in. So if you post something to it, it will send whatever you posted back with headers and such. So it's a quite nice way of just looking at parameters.
Yeah. So what I've done now, I put it into capture mode, and then I sent in a post message to this. And what I got here, I sent in transaction ID equals 1. And this will work perfectly fine if I put it in the mode simulate here, for example. Whoops. And then I run this again. This will work fine. It will send back what I did. But since this is an auto-generated from in my application, next time it will send it. Maybe we'll send 2 here. And then what we will get here is an error message from Hoverfly that says, all right, far up here.
Yeah,
Hoverfly
very short
error.
one.
Yeah, there was an error when matching, and then a bunch of tips on, well, this was the closest match and stuff. So this doesn't really work, now does it? So if we instead check this one out, here, let's go and have a look at this one instead. We can see that here we have an exact match for transaction ID equals 1. And this is where exact match comes into play. As long as it's exact match, it does what it says, it's an exact match. But here we can put XPath, we can put JSON path, we can put regex match. What I'm going to do is make use of blob match. Glob. Oh, now it's presentation nerves, I guess. And what that is essentially the same as when you use a wildcard in bash. So you can use a star here and say, whatever comes here, I don't care. This should work. So now we can try this instead. And then we can see, yeah, great. We got back the transaction ID in the response. We can see is not really matching in this one. But now we can have something that will always get a response no matter what random value we may get from the application in different if the day changes or anything.
But also, I mean, you can see that it's a transaction ID 2 up there. It's a 1 down there. My application just, it has parameters, dude.
Yeah, all right. That sounded so scripted. Let's see. So if we look at the recorder here, what I mentioned before was the templated. And this is put to false as normal. But what they put in is a templating engine. So I've prepared one here because I'm not really that familiar with templating engine yet. It's quite new in Hoverfly. So I did that beforehand. So here we have instead a message that goes to test.com regularly, and then we send in a parameter that is Bob's param, and it's a glob match, whatever we send in there. But this time we put the templated to true, and then we can use the template engine here to go to, in the request, the query param, Bob's param, whatever we get in the request, send that back in the response. So if we take a look at that one, what was the name of the template? And then Bob's param.
And then you have the,
yeah. So
and another nice thing here is that, well, test.com is not obviously, it's not going to return Bob's parameters no matter how much we want it to. So this is part of the, you can simulate whatever API you don't have. And you can see that obviously it's not going to return either. So it's quite nice. So it works for one case. Can you show another?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did. Cool. You're too fast.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right, but this is templating. We don't know much about it. It's quite new, but essentially they do have it in their documentation. They have a link to, because it's some templating engine they're using that is probably standardized in some way. I don't know much about it yet, but
it's a JavaScript library, so we're excused.
Yeah. But that's essentially it about that. But what about when we send something to the same, like state? That is always a problem. Like we send the same message, but we want different responses depending on if we sent the message before. And they have a solution for that too. So if we take a look at another one I prepared here, we can see that the first request we will get in, here we see we have no requirements for this request. It's towards test.com, it's a get. And what we send in response is not really anything interesting. But here is what's interesting here. We have transition state, which means that we will set these values. So we set the variable current in Hoverfly to bar, and we set the variable bar to true. And then we'll send in a list of these states that are here, remove them. So essentially, when we run it the first time, we will have, hopefully, current equals bar and bar equals true. And the next time we send in a request, we will have an exact match. So these ones are exactly the same as the one before, but this has an extra requirement here, and that is that the current is bar. So if this one has been run, the current will be bar. And this one will have a higher match rate than this one, because this one has more parameters matching. So if we take a look at this example, foo, and next time bar, and foo. So this is how Hoverfly handles states. And that's essentially it from the basic functionality from the command line tool.
No more cool command line guy.
All right.
But you can show them the Statestore as well, just to show them we're not cheating.
So if you want to actually look at the Statestore, you can look at, so here you can see what it is. So So they basically have a bunch of commands here, and like you can put in your own middleware if you want, like a Python script. You can put in that if you actually want to customize it, feel that there's something they don't have that you want. So there's a bunch of different modes here, but we won't go much into them today because we haven't used them in that sense a lot. And we also have the hoverctl logs here, so we can see what has gone on.
The nice exceptions and such.
Yeah, and then in the admin we can see we have captured 2, simulated 11, and stuff like that. So a little bit of statistics. But now we want to see how we write unit tests with the help of this.
Yeah, or at least component tests.
Yeah, and basically stuff like that. And you're going to handle that.
Sure. All right. So obviously it wouldn't be much good if we couldn't write our tests with it. Command line is cool and all, but that's not where I work. So this is a very, very simple test. If you're using the Spring framework, you'll recognize yourselves. We're going to boot up the Spring container. We're going to run it on a random port. And we're going to have a little helper here with the REST template just to not be able to or just to be able to find the random port. Otherwise, we'll have to guess or do other nasty stuff. So basically, Hoverfly as well comes into the picture with a class rule. Now, if you haven't used this before, it's basically your basic setup thing. We're setting up some state before the tests, and this just happened to be something that is run automatically for each test. And Hoverfly has a Java wrapper for this that does things for us. So all we do is we use this static class rule, the Hoverfly rule, and we just basically tell it to fire up a Hoverfly instance on a random port in simulation mode and set up my cool proxying thing in this framework for me because I don't know how to or whatever, and just make it work. So we haven't changed the application at all. The application is dead simple. As we we haven't seen yet, but we'll see a lot, is all it does is it has a get mapping for time, and all that does is fetch the cool time.jsontest.com API. So it returns it returns the current time. Very cool, very advanced example, but it'll do. So, as the name might hint, we're going to freeze time here as well. All we do here is, well, in the normal sense, if I wouldn't have had anything to start with, what I would have done is I would have recorded the thing coming from the server with using, first of all, here in simulation or capture mode to make it sort of, if I don't have the file, just do it for me. But if I do have the file, just simulate it for me. Or I could have used in capture mode and capture here as well to just save it down to a file. Now we already have the file, and you've already seen the example, so we won't drag you through it. But we're importing a file called time.json. Now what this does is it sends these things over the REST API using a hover control wrapper inside my test to the random Hoverfly instance we've just started, and just makes it import those files. Now what I do is I go to my dead simple controller and I get /time, and then you'll see that this is hard-coded. So we're expecting this one to have frozen time and everything should work. And if I run this, it's not very quick because it's Spring, but otherwise it works. Cool. Okay, so we haven't changed our application at all. We've imported some stupid Hoverfly rule and set it to simulation mode. And that just made everything work. Now, if we do have internet still, I think. It's not very good Wi-Fi in here. But if we wouldn't have had any Wi-Fi or we couldn't connect to the system, this would have worked anyway. So this was a dead simple case. Now for a bit more advanced one, we're using the exact same setup with our random ports. We're still using the Hoverfly rule and the test template. And we're going to use the DSL, the domain-specific language. So we're still doing some expected response here. It's still just the time JSON test API. We're doing simulate, but instead of reading a file, we're inputting things directly from our test. So we're doing a DSL. So for the same URL that our test happens to go to, we're saying / you should return a successful response with the expected response as JSON. Cool. We're getting the response from the server, and then we're checking that everything works. And as any other normal, cool mocking tool, you can still verify that you've actually had a response there and that everything actually works with using the verify thing. If I wanted to simulate a delay, I could use the same thing, the DSL. Same get, same URL, same success. I just say, OK, and I want to add a delay of 5 seconds as well. Cool. That might make things work, or that might make things break a lot, depending on your needs. We're just timing that and checking that everything, well, it should take more than 5 seconds, otherwise something is broken, right? And for the last part, we're introducing some errors. So instead of returning a success, this should be a bad request. So internally in our Spring application, things should crash. Otherwise, it's not a very otherwise it's not a very good test. We're getting the same thing, and we're asserting that the thing that comes back is a server error. And if we run these things, everything should work out as well. And we'll actually see now, since we have the Hoverfly wrapper set up and it's putting things out in the log as well, we'll see that when we come to the delay test, it actually stops. And it says, well, I'm waiting here for 5 seconds, so sorry if your test takes too long. But it works, and it actually prints out those things as well. You saw that all the tests passed as well. Nice. Okay. Now there are some things. The Java wrapper, obviously the native language is Go. Everything is not just going to work fine and dandy all the time, since it's someone else maintaining it. So it lags a slight bit. Not much. It works very well for the most case, but since everything else is progressing so fast, I guess they can't keep up just as well with the wrapper. So if you ever feel the need, like, well, this is not cutting it for me, I have some very special, cool case, you can always use the REST API. It has a very, well documented, I shouldn't say, but it has a documented REST API as well, where you can see all the things that should go into these things. And that's very nice when you, for instance, want to record something in advance. Like I have a response that comes down. Now there are loads of parameters that should be generic but aren't in my response. Well, I can just remove them. Okay, so I record the file in my test. I get the file on disk. I modify those things. And then I have everything. So the next time I can just import the file and everything works, even though the format is not a one-to-one mapping. So I would still have had those exact match issues that we saw in the beginning, but I modified programmatically in my test. So that's quite neat. So you can sort of work around all of those little problems that you have using this REST API or using a middleware if you choose then as well. But it's overkill for most purposes, I'd say. Let's see if we can find the presentation again. There we are. Okay, so that's all for the sort of live part. We won't keep you much longer. This is just to say, well, okay, so is everything going to be a nice smooth road? Well, it's the current version of Hoverfly is 0.14. It should tell you something. It's not perfect, but it's still very stable. So I mean, we're using it for our testing purposes, and it's worked out very nicely so far. There's good performance in it.
The only issue is basically that when I come up with a new update, the schema can be basically they can basically completely new schema the next time almost. But it is version controlled the schema, so and you can it's more that they will have a lot of development. So if you will continue to update it, you might have to change your recordings.
Yeah. So basically, the way to look at it is you're privileged to know about it before it's cool. Or something like that. So there are some things like, for instance, perhaps since this is an external thing and there are some things that are recurring, like perhaps I have a UUID or I have a counter or I have a date or something that I want to use. Well, right now it handles parameters and you can do this programmatically yourself. It's going to be something that's implemented very, very soon. But I mean, for almost all cases, it works nicely anyway. So that's something that's likely going to come soon. And this is more just to say that things aren't they aren't perfect yet, even though they're actually pretty close, and they're much better than the competition. So to finish off, Hoverfly is a quite weird name. It's blomfluga in Swedish, which might lead you to some conclusions as well if you look for them, which also is a very crappy name since it makes it ungoogleable, which is a verb. So if you find it, if you want to find it, it's at hoverfly.io, and you can find the code examples we've used so far and all the Maven dependencies and such you'd want as well in the GitHub repo, and you can find our LinkedIns and such. Or you can find us via the Squeed webpage if you want to as well. So do we have any questions? Do we have any any weirdness in the presentation? Anything you want to ask us about? Or is everyone just looking for beer at Bishop's Arms? Yes? If you look online, it will say so. In many cases, it will say, well, state is so much better handled in WireMock, or it will say, however, WireMock has state. That's not true anymore because they updated it like last week. So now it has state and now it has templates. So it's a very fast development indeed. No, obviously, yeah. And basically as well, WireMock is made as an external server. So you'll reset your endpoints for the base scenario to go towards it and say like, this is the one thing to rule them all. While WireMock just works as a transparent proxy and you won't notice it. So you don't, for Hoverfly, you don't have to modify anything. For WireMock, you'll have to reset your endpoints.
Yeah, one of the strengths with Hoverfly is that once it's the performance, it's made to be a performance test tool if you go to the web page. That's the purpose. So especially you can see that as long as you go with exact match, they will hash everything and cache it. So the performance will lag slightly if you don't use exact match for those parts, but that's one case where it's much better than WireMock, for example, which is quite slow. So because we did run Gatling on this one with like 10,000, we went up with like 3,500 requests per second or something without
3,900 it managed, and the response times was like 99% of all responses came in within 8 seconds, which is, well, it's not great, but it's 99% of that huge performance test load. So it's still quite nice, I'd say, for a thing not even in a major version.
And it's basically a proxy server, very simple configured as that. So yeah.
It works very nicely. It can proxy a proxy, so to speak. It can use channel proxying, so to speak. So you do a, I think it's proxy via or something is the flag. You can see it in the help as well.
And it does a lot of things that basically the WireMock guy said, I had no idea how they did that with HTTPS and stuff. It just works as a proxy, and it sends it to HTTPS, and it works, and people don't really know how. Yeah,
there's some real mumbo-jumbo going on with the certificates, but everything seems to accept it, so it's just magically works. Very cool. All right. Anything else?
We have a glob match, which is the bash thing with the wildcard. Yeah, you can take it out. And then you have JSON path, XPath, regex. What was it more?
Here we go. So exact match, glob match, regex matcher. You have XML, XML path or XPath, sorry, JSON matcher, JSON path. Well, if that doesn't cover your needs, I don't know what will. And it handles binary payloads as well. Quite nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still HTTP, binary payloads via HTTP, but still. So it could probably, I'm saying that because I don't know about the HTTP2 support. I think it works. But for the gRPC tools, for instance, it should theoretically work. All right. Okay, so no more questions? Then thank you, and hit us up afterwards at Bishop's Arms or such if you